Welcome to the Invincible Innovation Show, the podcast for changemakers. Each week, I talk to the most fascinating entrepreneurs and innovation leaders about innovation, strategy, and design. Hey everyone! Today we'll talk about transforming your organization into ecosystem-driven platforms. Welcome to Invincible Innovation Live Show. I'm so glad that you're here. I'm Mazor, Kario, innovation and value creation expert, and I'll be your host. And today I have a very special guest. How's Simone? Hi, how are you?
Hello. Nice
Great
to
to
be.
see you. Simone Cicero is the CEO of Boundaryless and creator of platform design Toolkit. How are you today?
Very good. Very looking forward to this conversation with you since a few weeks. So let's do that.
Yeah, and we're live on LinkedIn, YouTube, and Facebook, and you're much invited to join the discussion and ask questions. We'd love to hear what you think. And now we can start. Before we just dive into the innovation discussion, could you tell us about the platform design toolkit?
Yes, so let's try to be brief. Platform Design
Sure.
Toolkit is a 7 years long story. I started in 2013, now 8 almost, where basically when I was invited to the Barcelona Design Week, and I was asked to basically talk about platforms. That was my interest, in that time. It was the moment where new businesses such as Airbnb and Uber were just grabbing the news highlights, and I prototyped basically a fork of the business model canvas. And because I was working with customers since a few months, and about this topic of platforms and ecosystems. And I noticed that the linearity, let's say, this pipeline version of a business model wasn't really fit to the purpose I was trying to achieve with customers. This idea that we wanted to have a more systemic understanding of all the players that were involved in these new innovative business models. And so I prototyped that in 2013, and from then, since then, basically, I always pursued this community-driven open conversation. The platform design canvas at the time, it was only one canvas, was released in Creative Commons as the business model canvas was, and from since then, basically, we have been releasing the first massive release in 2016. It was a repackaging of many more canvases. Basically, the platform design toolkit in its original release in 2016 was including tools to understand the players in the ecosystem, what they could exchange, what kind of learning systems you can create to improve the performance of everyone, and basically, finally, how do you contextualize it into an experience that you want to bring to the ecosystem. And since then, we had terrific demand, and I've been essentially training almost 1,000 people all over the world. The first, when it was possible to travel, in London, Berlin, Paris, New York, and many other cities, Amsterdam, and so on. And since the start of since the start of the pandemic, and then we moved to online training. So we had the opportunity to train people from all over the world. And at the moment, there are more than 150 certified practitioners on our boot camp. So we have kind of creating this community of practice around exploring innovation opportunities through platforms, designing platform strategies, and now we are also integrating validation tools and growth analysis. So that, for example, the followers of our work will know that in the last 2 months and a half, we started producing a growth series to analyze network effects and growth engines in general, and has been very interesting so far. So that's pretty much what the PDT is. It's a toolkit, a set of canvases for strategizing in platforms.
So it sounds like a journey that you started like with something small, and then it came like to be bigger. And do you think that through these years you learned something that you didn't know in the beginning? What was like new for you that you learned through the creation of something which is bigger?
Well, a lot, because most of the increments and additions to the platform design toolkit were essentially driven by my work with customers, our work with customers. So we also provide, of course, private workshops for those that cannot attend our public trainings, or cannot do self application, no? Because we also release completely fully free Creative Commons released the user guides that you can use to do anything you want on your own. But working directly with customers, and also those that have been attending our master classes with their own projects, has always been a great source of innovation in the tools. What I've learned, I learned that, since the very start, I think in terms of content, I've learned that, first of all, platforms are much more complex than it seemed. So, for example, marketplaces are only one of the phases of the strategy. You also have very important product side of a platform strategy. If you think about, for example, the software as a service that most of the platform players provide to their customers, that normally are the producers on the market. So, besides helping them to connect with customers, also that product side, what I make easier of your workflow is very important. Then I also learned that you can strategize around your paths to grow. So, for example, the work we are doing on flywheels and network effects analysis, this is also extremely important at the strategic level, not just as a tactic. So that's also another thing that is very important. The most important thing I learned, I think, is that when you create a language and a methodology, you need to be patient. So you cannot go and every week change the canvas, even if you wanted to, because languages need to be, need to create a space for conversation and having a shared taxonomies, shared glossaries. This is extremely important. And also, if I can add that canvases are important, but the most important thing of the work we do, I think, is about aligning teams. And there is this magic that happens when you create frameworks, that instantly people stop arguing with each other and they start to argue about the design they're making, which is a very powerful way to do real strategy. Because sometimes we talk about strategy and we imagine, these consultants and leaders in a room, plotting stuff on the wall. But the reality is that then teams need to execute the strategy. And so anything that you create that can align a team towards a shared vision and can become the context and the objective of the discussion, besides my position and your position, it's really powerful, because it starts to become the place where everything gets attracted and everything gets so consolidated and align teams towards execution.
Yeah. So what you're saying is this language that you talked about is something that people acquire, and then they could use it in order to communicate better and to understand better what they're doing and what is the goals. And going from strategy to really execution demands the same understanding of what the C-level decided and what is being executed by the teams.
Right.
So,
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, Paul Graham says that strategy is a form of procrastination. No? So whatever we do,
I agree with that.
whatever we do to shorten this path to execution, that cannot just start, from scratch. You cannot execute if you don't have a shared vision. Then, but this this process to produce this shared strategic vision needs to be short, and this is what our frameworks are all about. So do this in a few days, but then start executing.
Yeah, I know that when you say about procrastination, I heard a talk, and he said that it takes about 2 years for a company that was disturbed by a disruptive innovation to think about a strategy, to think what could be done or should be done, and it takes 2 years for a company. And like a startup in 2 companies could be a unicorn worth $1 billion. So more or less,
Right.
the timing and the time it takes should be adjusted to what is needed. And if you shorten the time from thinking to doing, it really gives you an advantage. This is how I
Yeah,
see.
especially in a period of inflection points, when you do this, you need to do this as a corporate, for example. You don't need to do that this thing of rethinking your business model, for example, every 10 years. You need to do it every 6 months, and if you every time it happens, you wait 2 years to put everybody on the same page, then it's gonna be very hard for you to catch up with D2C innovators that are gonna cut chunks of your market away.
Yeah. And do you see like companies doing that every 6 years or every year even?
I mean, the companies that are mostly innovative at the moment, I see some of them. They essentially have embraced a way to just avoid doing this in a top-down manner. So they have been unbundling and fluidifying their own organizational structure, so they don't even need to think about that. So because that happens at the edge of the organization in a very organic and continuous way. So some companies are doing it. Some others, I would say, the vast majority are just playing this innovation theater that you know very well. I mean, that's the most challenging aspect of innovating in a corporate. The environment tends to value a slide as much as an experiment, and this is a very problematic topic.
Yeah. So what do you think is like, why do companies do this innovation theater? So I understand the PR marketing aspect of it, but I believe that they don't know really how to play the game. And that's why they're doing this theater. What do you think?
Well, the theater aspect is mostly related to social and cultural elements. So, you be familiar. You will be probably familiar with the work of David Graeber, that complained anthropologist when he referred to this idea of bullshit jobs. So you have this position, you have this title attached to yourself, and then nothing else counts. It's just how much you can consolidate that position, even if it's attached to a ton of technical and organizational debt. As long as you are protected, you don't need to be effective. You don't need to be learning, because the laws, the policies, the culture protects you. And that's an issue that is stronger, especially in Europe and in the US. But in Europe, most of all, and that's why, for example, Europe has the most lagging startup ecosystem or innovation ecosystem overall, because our culture is a culture of protection of the workers. And that's one thing. So the theater part is more a social and cultural element, while the lack of capability to actually innovate is more a complex topic, is related to I would say the fact that we are transitioning in a new age, and this transition has been happening much faster than anyone in the corporate space has been able to cope with, for structural reasons, mainly the fact that the organizational model we used has been optimized for certain types of business models that have generated the success and the lots of inertia. So I would say that the problem is twofold. One is cultural, and one is really technological. So considering an organizational model as a technology, our organizational technology is not ready. And this is also, I think, interesting if you consider that most of the organizational innovations we are seeing, especially in the corporate space, are coming from China, that doesn't have this industrial organizational tradition that we have.
Yeah. The fact that Europe is mainly built on manufacturing capabilities makes it hard for the leaders of these like industries to think as a technical or a software product related processes, which are so different, and the business model is different, the revenues are different, the way that you could grow is different, so forth. It reminds me that I heard like like weeks ago, somebody said that the Hilton hotels, it took 93 years in order to build 600,000 rooms. And it took about, I think, 5 years for Airbnb to get 2 million rooms out there. So how fast it could be, right? They didn't build a room, but they gave a solution to the same problem, right? So the fact that it's so fast is something that is so alien for them, I guess. And that makes it hard for them to think about it this way.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. This is the inertia part, but I think also the question is not just in the processes that these companies have been running, for example, manufacturing, but also in the really in the expectations of how you relate with work. How you relate with work as a thing that happens, at some stage in your life, and at least this is the classic way to relate to work in Europe, for example, and then it goes. It's enough for you to do your job, which is this crazy idea. But also the IP, the relationship we have with IP, intellectual property in Europe and the US, has been also, I think, slowing down a lot our capability to deal with the competition and deal with new things coming up. While, for example, Chinese, the Chinese culture is much more friendly to shared IP. If you're familiar with the Shanzai topic, and so in general, I think that our let's say industrial management tradition of success, of course, is now a big issue for European and US at some point organizations, especially the incumbents.
So what do you think is the biggest obstacle for innovation for companies today?
Well, I mean, as I said, more or less policy is one. So the fact that our legislation around the jobs, for example, is so protective for the worker. This is one thing. Then, as I said, our culture, so our inability to question the value of the work we do. So
when you're saying culture, is like the company culture or the country culture in general?
Well, I mean, it's very much more a problem of European culture, for example, or in general. It's a mix. If you think about the culture of work we have in Europe and mostly in the US, it's related to the Protestant ethic of work, and is very much deeply related to the idea of a bureaucracy. So it's hard to untangle European culture, for example, of work from the history that we have, which is an history of colonialism and an history of structured and dominating organizations. It's really complex. But I think the culture as a whole, it's too important, to some extent, to change as fast as we should now in this moment. So this is another thing. And of course, the last part is the inertia due to past success. Companies have business models that have been working for decades, and so now what is happening, and they don't get these the fact that I think we live through a nexus at the moment. It's a nexus between two ages, and they seem to be too attached to the past, but also because they lack the organizational capabilities. So that's also, I think, to be honest, the organizational development community as well should be, I don't want to say blamed, but it has been not enough, I would say, ready to question most of the frames that we use to define an organization. So now we are lagging because we are not used to question the existing frames of organizing that we've been used to for decades.
And I think that most professionals from organizational development comes from a legacy of what they studied in the academy, and academy doesn't like talk about innovation that much, and what they are used to doing with companies that are not innovating, and the structures they're helping to build is the past structures and not the future ones. That maybe they know them less, and maybe they are not used to even thinking this way about an organization as a live entity that needs to adjust and move and not be that stable and static as they are used to.
Yeah. Also, the entrenched interests that exist, around existing organizations. For example, when you think about the workers, the existing organizations, especially in Europe, they seem to have this very strong responsibility towards their workers, and it's hard essentially to change organizations because you want to protect all the existing interests that exist around your organizational structure. So it's hard to if there is no systemic approach. I think this is why, for example, Chinese and to some extent also US-based organizations are more keen to innovate, because there is more strategically systemic approach at the nation level. So especially in China, I mean, China is crazy. There is this vertical integration of the state and the corporate and the market that allows, for example, organizations to take very bold transformational efforts, because the worker is not just the worker of the company, it's also a state worker to some extent. And in Europe, this doesn't really happen. There is a friction between the corporate, or in general the private capital, that is seen to some extent as an enemy of the worker. So because of our story, our history of relationships between capital and labor, and if you have this conflicting situation where often the state is seen as a third party, like somebody that needs to regulate and moderate without any strategic involvement in the discussion, which is what Chinese are doing now, it becomes really hard to compete, especially in a world where now power is regionalizing, and we are seeing massive trends of multipolar world. And so it will become even more important to have a direct connection between the market and the policymakers with a strategic vision that needs to be achieved. And I think Israel, for example, is a very good example of this. The government and the private sector really working together to achieve what they aim for.
Yeah, and one more thing that is very prominent here in Israel is the fact that people are I don't know if they love, they're used to change. That's what I would say. So for them, going from one job to the other, especially in technology, like every year, 2 years, 3 years, it just makes sense to them. They don't think about going to a company and growing up within a company and going through the organization ladder. They are going to another company and getting more money and a better salary and a better maybe there are more managers right now and so forth. They're doing that just by zigzagging. They don't need to stay in one place. So if we're talking about that, so how could building like ecosystems help companies innovate better?
Well, I mean, in general, I think organizations need to understand that part of the transition, part of this nexus we are living, is a nexus between the age of the vertically integrated organization, the managerial organization, into what we call the post-industrial organizing. There is essentially a switch between a shift in power from the center to the edge, from the company to the customers, to the users, and in general from the traditional organization into the ecosystem. So if you suddenly change your perspective and you understand that innovation doesn't come from inside, but it comes from the outside, what you need to build is essentially an organization that captures consumption patterns, captures innovation trends, and enables them, and within time institutionalize these innovations so that the ecosystem can create more value at higher value chain layers. So the organization becomes much more defined in an outside-in way than in the traditional inside-out way. And to do this, our experience with platform design and the EEO, so the Entrepreneurial Ecosystem Enabling Organization, that is another framework we are now building from the collaboration we're having with Hire and other organizations. It tells us that essentially we are entering an age of micro-entrepreneurial units. So lots of the value that we produce in the economy of today is contextual. So it's in the small teams that can really become create these deep connection with their audiences. For example, when we talk about knowledge work, or even about how we create a small scale organizations that can connect with their community of users locally or around a certain product. So this is why it's very important for organizations at the moment to understand that becoming a platform is not just creating a different business model, but is resetting all the processes that they are running from the outside in. And this includes production, but also includes strategy, and also includes vision, and also includes purpose, and also includes basically all the pillars across which you run your organization. And really to do so, it takes a lot of I would say a radical approach, because if I talk about, for example, what Dave Snowden had changed with me on our podcast recently, it was very clear when he said we need to move away from external scaffolding, so an exoskeleton, if you want, of your organization that can constrain the growth, it can constrain the movement, into what he calls an internal skeleton, an endoskeleton, if you want, so an internal scaffolding. So once you have an internal scaffolding that is mainly made of constraints, for example, about the rules you need to use to create a new unit, or the way you interact with other micro units in your organization, then you can grow and adapt to whatever is emerging from the ecosystem. Instead, if you have this very strong centralized idea of, an editorial idea of what your organization is, what your products are, you're not open to these insights coming from outside. You tend to protect, let's say, your vision as the center, as the core of the organization, and this creates all sorts of frictions and fragilities in your organization that at some point tend to break up. There is this fantastic blog that is now hard to find online for some reasons, I don't know why, but where Shirky said that Clay Shirky said that the last sign of having a too complex organization essentially is collapse, is failure. So you just tend to collapse at some point because your organization doesn't fit with the needs and the elasticity that you need to have to deal with the modern world.
Yeah. So it's like there is this metaphor. If there is strong wind, you could either be a tree or a grass. And if you're a grass and you know how to go with the wind, although that you're softer and maybe even more fragile, you will sustain yourself. And if you're very strict and you have these rules and this is what I am, I'm not something else, and I'm not open to anything outside, I will not be able to really hold this winds of change actually that are currently happening all over the world, much more right now with COVID for sure. And what do you think is the most important element of an organizational structure, other than this fluidity that you just said? Is it like going from the management? Is like the structure of the company? Is it like the way that they manage the different units and the new opportunities outside, so forth?
Well, I think in general, there are essentially three aspects. One is definitely the cultural aspect. So I will mention the three so I don't forget. One is culture, one is technology, let's say, and one is the organizational structure. And the culture is really important, and it often comes from leadership. Comes from for example, I've been working with a higher group in the last 2 years, and a lot of what the organization has been able to achieve in the last decades. It comes from this visionary leader, the CEO Jean Grumin, that is an extremely well-read and very enthusiastic thinker that has been pushing these waves of narrative shift through the organization until he built an organization where the culture is so strong, the entrepreneurial culture is so strong that now they attract entrepreneurs. They don't even need anymore to select and to, because the people they attract, they're always and already thinking this way. And so first of all, if you're a leader in your organization, what you need to do, you need to build this culture. You need to build these narratives of expanded opportunities, narrative of entrepreneurship, narrative of human development, and so on. Then the technology, in our understanding, unbundling the technology into pieces and creating all these interfaces between the pieces that you run in your organization, being it a technological enabler, being it a go-to-market context like an ecosystem or a marketplace, being it an extension platforms as we call them, so ways to integrate more technological solutions into your system, like with application extenders or templates or plugins. So having the technology, seeing the technology as this unbundled set of pieces that you can recombine and rebundle nearer to the customers, that's extremely important. So if your organization, for example, has two units that conflict over a certain way to manage a piece of software or hardware, then you need to be able to see the big picture, because otherwise you'd never be able to say, it makes sense for us to commoditize this piece of hardware because we can build a software ecosystem on top of it. We always have the hardware unit saying, I'm not going to let you commoditize our work because we are the hardware players, we are the hardware builders. So you need to have this overall vision. And finally, on top of this vision, if you do not build, create an organizational model where essentially everybody has a skin in the game, everybody has an interface to everybody else, and it's easy to recombine. It's easy for entrepreneurs to say, I want to build this. I'm going to take my risk. I'm going to seek for someone in the organization that invests into this idea. Then it's going to be impossible, essentially, for you to create innovations. So either you unbundle your organization and you make it as, I would say, a better place to create innovation versus the outside, which is not in most of the existing organizations, then you're not going to have innovations. So the big questions for organizations today is this. Leaders need to understand that the biggest challenge of organizing of the 21st century is to convince someone to work for your organization, to contribute inside your organization. And it's a matter of purpose, it's a matter of technology, and it's a matter of organizational model. If you do not approach all these things with the idea that you want to create a place where people need to be, I would say, enthusiastic of joining and contributing and finding their ways to develop themselves and creating new innovations, then nothing is going to happen. You're going to fail all the time. You're going to run after the market all the time, and you're going to need so much money to keep with that. That is going to be very challenging for your organization to play a decent role.
Yeah, I think that what you're saying, as I see it, is like you have so many talents and so many human resources that you are not utilizing. And in order for them to do more, you need to enable that. Right now, they have only one role, one thing. This is what they're doing, what they're told they're doing. This is what their daily life is. And if you want to create something, it cannot come from a very smart someone in the C-level saying, yeah, that's an idea, and then it will happen. You need so much more people creating and innovating in order to have this very, very good one idea that could grow your company. And it needs to be much more vast than what most companies are thinking.
Yeah, maybe I can challenge a little bit this last point that I think another big important thing to understand that today is not just no more just about the big ideas as well, is that the growth that we can generate in a world that is much more interconnected and where the small is much more capable is a growth that is made of many small or medium pieces. So markets are going to be much more vertical, much more managed, much more contextual. So imagine that the future is going to be much less about Airbnb and much more about 1,000 hospitality platforms that serve specific niches. So to develop this, you need a pervasive entrepreneurship. You need pervasive leadership. You need 1,000 leaders. You don't just need one, So even if you think about Uber, for example, when Uber was challenged by growing in different cities, they pushed the profit and loss a lot into the hands of the regional leaders, the city leaders. So growth in a world that is hyper-connected is happening in a very pervasive and micro way. So it's not even about doing a lot of bets until you get the big bet. It's about embracing this idea that you don't want to direct growth in a certain direction, but you need to capture growth opportunities as they emerge in the context. And to do this, you need empowered professionals that are able to take ownership for their market, to manage their money, manage their teams, managing their profit or loss, so that they can add that bit of success that is going to make the success of the organization. And this is it's very challenging. For example, for one thing, that is profit maximization. This is why embracing an ecosystemic organization where strategy is much more emergent and where direction is, there is much more creative entropy of the organization going in this market, that product. It's challenging for the idea that we have the corporate as a machine to maximize the shareholder value. Because shareholder value is completely decontextualized, while growth in the future is much more contextual. So we're moving away from the monolithic organization in what, for example, my friend Nora Bateson calls the transcontextual organization. And a transcontextual organization is much more related to people on the field, in the context, that understand what value they can create without obsessing about maximizing the profit generation capabilities, but maybe much more invested into creating something that is important for the people that use the services and is resilient as becomes part of daily lives for many professionals and individuals.
So what you're saying is that companies need to be more open-minded, in a sense that they need to understand what's going on within the field, and therefore they need someone there. They cannot be, all the C-level cannot just distribute to all of the locations. So they need so many people out there. And once they're integrated into these societies and into these contexts, the power of the company is much bigger because they are answering the real needs of all these locations at once, all these opportunities, all these solutions, all these capabilities at once.
Yes, I mean, it becomes a much more, it's not just about piloting growth and opportunities from your office in San Francisco. It's really about being in the context, being in the space. And CEOs and C-levels in general, so in general, management layers in existing organizations, they need to care about their jobs, because the path they are on most of the times with this monolithic approach to markets is a path of irrelevance and failure. So they need to embrace essentially that and understand that the challenges to the corporate model and the incumbency are so big that it's really existential. So really, we really need this two dual narrative. One is extremely great opportunities that we have now to transform everything we do with the internet, with these technologies. But on the other hand, there is something to be embraced, which is how to become entrepreneurial enough to be in touch with your customers, in touch with your market, enable them in this continuous interaction, much less about projecting your idea into the market, expecting that the market will buy that.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. And I think it's some kind of democratizing what is the organization actually, and really changing the way that we think about a business. And it's much more fluent. It's much more. It's like embracing change in a wider sense of not only I decide something different right now. I allow many people in the organization to do decisions and to go and take it further and do something with.
But also from the outside, so really understanding what is the role of the brand and the organization in this outside-in landscape versus the traditional one. That's the big challenge.
Yeah, it is a big challenge. Both sides are challenging, I guess, especially right now. If we talked about the fast change that there are in the markets right now in the COVID crisis, it's even much faster. So they need to do it even like in emergency, I would say, than when before it was important, but not in emergency, right? Like right now.
Right.
So I want to thank you for your time. It's been such a pleasure. So where could people hear more about what you're doing and about the platform design toolkit and so forth?
Well, I mean, the easiest way is to go on our website, platformdesigntoolkit.com, where they can find all the activities we do at Boundaryless. We are in the process of launching a new website and a new brand, so stay tuned.
Wow,
in the
good
next
luck.
couple of months. Yes. Yeah, I mean, this is also a good example of a transition, because when you start around one product, and now I didn't tell that Boundaryless itself is in the process of embracing this idea of distributed profit and loss, and so you can see how much challenging is from a branding perspective, and it's been a great opportunity to learn. So platformdesigntoolkit.com, but then I would like to mention my Twitter handle at Medabyte, so MEEDABYTE, and LinkedIn, of course. I'm there, and it's always a great way to engage around business conversation. I can mention that in our website they will be able to find 3 toolkits. One is called the Platform Design Toolkit, the one we've been talking about. Then we have, and by the way, tomorrow we're going to launch a new version of our Platform Opportunity Exploration Guide. That is
congratulations.
Something that you used before the design, and has been 2 years on the field, so it's really interesting. And of course, the EEO toolkit, that is our entrepreneurial ecosystem enabling organization toolkit, that I'm going to teach very soon at a masterclass coming up in April, late April, with Bill Fisher and Manuele Quintarelli. So if you're interested in understanding how you can challenge your organizational model, this is a very short-term opportunity that you have.
Wow, it sounds great. It sounds good. So I want to thank you again. It's been such a pleasure, Simone, to have you here. And I really enjoyed our talk. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. Looking forward maybe to meet you in Israel as soon as possible.
Oh, you're so invited.
I was there once, but I really look forward to come again.
So you could be my guest next time when you come. So I would love to see you here. Hopefully. And to all of you change makers out there, thank you for joining me. You're much invited to visit invincibleinnovation.com, and I'll see you next week with another insightful talk. See ya.
Thank you.
I'm Mazor Kario, and you've been listening to the Invincible Innovation Podcast. Make sure to visit our website, invincibleinnovation.com, where you can learn more about our programs and my book, Innovating Through Chaos. I'll be waiting for you next week in our next episode. Thank you for listening.